Convening this meeting of the City of Portland Budget Committee. This meeting is to receive a corrected version of the Urban Renewal Tax Levy, Attachment E, into the approved budget. On May 20th, 2020, the Budget Committee voted to approve the tax levies, including the detailed Urban Renewal Tax Levy. The following documents did not include the final fiscal 2020-2021 Urban Renewal Tax Levy table. This action will accept the correct Urban Renewal Levy table into the record. I would like to call for a motion. A motion to accept the amended document.
So moved.
It's been moved by Commissioner.
Second.
Udela. It's been seconded by Commissioner Fritz. Any questions? Caller, please call the roll.
Udele,
Aye.
Fritz,
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye. The attachment E has been approved and has been moved into the budget document. I will now adjourn the budget committee session. This meeting of the City of Portland Budget Committee is now adjourned. I will now turn the committee over to the TSCC. The TSCC, let's see, moving on. I call to order now the annual City of Portland budget hearing. I'm going to turn it over now to David Beringer to conduct the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you.
I will now call to order the annual City of Portland budget hearing for the TSCC. My name is David Beringer, and I am the chair of the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, and I want to welcome you all to our hearing this morning. I will now ask my fellow commissioners and the staff to introduce themselves and to state if they have any business relationships with the district that could be perceived as a conflict of interest.
Good morning. Good to see you all again. I'm James Offsink, Vice Chair for the TSCC. This is my 5th year with the TSCC, and when I'm not here, I work at OHSU. Oh, and I don't have a real or perceived conflict with the district.
Good morning. I'm Margot Norton. I have lived in Portland for 25 years. I live in the Beaumont-Wilshire neighborhood. I am retired. My career was in government finance. I retired from Metro, the regional government. I'm also here with the TSCC for 5 years, and I have no conflicts with the city.
This is my 4th year with the TSCC. I'm in Northeast Portland, Concordia neighborhood. That's where I live. And I have no real or perceived conflict of interest with the city. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harmony Kidos. I am a new member of TSCC, so nice to meet everybody. I live in Southeast Portland. I also have 2 small children, ages 3 and 6, who are in the house, so I will mute when I'm not speaking, and please forgive any background noise. I have a background as a math and science teacher and still work in curriculum and assessment. I have no perceived or real conflicts with the district. Thank you.
And I would add, I'm sorry, I should have said, my day job, I work for Portland State University in the President's Office as a senior policy analyst.
Craig, you're on mute again.
Craig Gibbons, staff to the commission.
Shuni Betchart, staff.
Great. With that, I'll ask the city representatives to please introduce themselves for our hearing.
Commissioner Hardesty, I believe this begins with you.
Oh, excellent. My apologies. Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. I have no perceived or conflicts for this meeting.
Commissioner Chloe Daly, no real or perceived conflicts.
Good morning, everybody. Amanda Fritz. I've seen you many times before, some of you, and it's nice to see you again. Thank you for the work that you do. I have no real or perceived conflicts.
I believe I'm turning this over now to Commissioner Fritz. Is that correct?
We have a few statements first, and then we'll turn back to you.
Excellent. Thank you.
So thank you all for being here. On behalf of the commission, I would like to express our appreciation for how the city has managed through these difficult times. You are steering the city through a pandemic, and you've had to respond to a truly transformational period over the last 2 weeks, as Commissioner Hardesty has said. We have seen your efforts to rise up and to meet the challenges that the city has endured, and you've done that with determined leadership, and we really appreciate that. And with you, we hope that there are better times ahead of us. The city budget is the focal point of our discussion today, and this is more important now than ever. And for the year, the things that are in front of us could be some more dramatic citizen involvement. With that in mind, we'd like to focus today on the budget. Our questions today are going to be a little bit different than they have been in the previous years, just because of the circumstances. But for the public, for whom the TSCC represents, this is an opportunity to hear directly from the accountable citizens about how you are, the accountable officials about how you'll be managing through the uncertainty. After your brief introductory remarks, we will ask our questions, and then if there are public citizens who want to address the commission, that'll be the following piece. With that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Hardesty if she has some introductory remarks.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do. I would like to say we started this budget process in a period of continued revenue growth with approximately $28 million in our forecast for one-time and ongoing available general fund resources. But then in March, COVID-19, the public health crisis led not only to significant operational changes, but also created a sudden, sharp economic downturn, coupled with unprecedented uncertainty in our financial outlook. We quickly adapted, and thanks in large part to the strong financial policies exercised by the council over the past several years, as well as the partnership of our employees and labor partners, we were able to craft a measured and responsible budget to balance the estimated reduction of $75 million to the general fund. As a council, we strove to implement a budget that is as financially responsible as possible in an evolving financial crisis, and also produce a budget that preserves and protects the most vulnerable Portlanders during this crisis. I am proud of the budget that we have crafted and approved, yet I know there's more work to be done. We will look to adapt to the needs of the communities we serve and to the city's evolving financial picture over the next several months as we move through this crisis. So thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Fritz, did you have something you wanted to add at this point?
Is this where we do the questions as in the
no,
script,
not yet.
Jessica?
No, that'll be in a second. I just thought maybe you had some other. Okay. With that, we'll start our questions. And I have the first one. In the current fiscal year ending on June 30th, in just a few weeks, is the district expecting any year-end budgetary problems arising from the revenue shortfall that Commissioner Hardesty has talked about, or any unanticipated expenditures due to the COVID-19 situation? And what impact will this have on the district's ending fund balance that are not yet reflected in the upcoming budget?
Thank you for the question. There does not appear to be as much near-term exposure here for the City of Portland when compared with other public sector jurisdictions in Oregon or the local region. Almost all of the general fund revenue sources are collected collecting revenue on economic activity that occurred prior to the COVID-19 crisis. The situation may be more acute in other city bureaus like transportation, which collects in a real-time manner with an eye on current parking and gas tax revenues, both of which have been hammered by the current crisis in real time. With the general fund, there was a sharp decline in user fees normally generated through recreation centers and programming. Both transportation and parks took action in early April to curtail spending and adjust their budgets to the new financial situation.
And then will there be any effect on the ending fund balance that you know of?
The immediate major general fund exposure is through transient lodging taxes, which makes up about 6% of general fund revenues, and most of the revenue was already booked prior to COVID-19. Furthermore, the city has taken actions to limit expenditures through the end of the year by implementing furloughs and a hiring freeze.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. I have the next question. So for the upcoming, now that we talked about the current year, for the upcoming fiscal year 2021 budget, should the economy remain stalled, where do you see the district's greatest vulnerabilities? And then how is the district going to monitor and respond quickly if revenue collections go off track or if there are unanticipated service requirements?
So obviously I'm pinch hitting for Mayor Wheeler here, and I should have said at the beginning that I'm sure he would like to be here. And colleagues, I'm wondering, everybody has the script, right? Should we take turns in doing the answers?
I'm happy to pitch in, and I'm sure Commissioner Udaley is definitely tracking us as well. Are you going to answer? We're on question 2, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it would be good if we took turns.
I'm happy with that. And I should have said that at the beginning. Mayor Wheeler gives his regrets. He would have loved to have been here today, but as you can imagine, life is moving extremely quick for all of us here. So in answer to your question, the greatest vulnerability is focused on the City of Portland's business license, i.e. income taxes. It currently makes up about 1/4 of the general fund revenue. And in a typical recession, the city loses about 1/4 of that revenue source. In this case, that would mean about $40 million, though at this point, we expect the impact to be slightly larger than that given the steepness of this contraction.
And then the rest of the question about if there are unanticipated service requirements, or if as you mentioned, I guess at the end of your response, if the revenue collections do kind of exceed or vary greatly from the model, what's the city going to do to kind of address that?
The city has several points during the year where we review and make corrections to our budget. These budget monitoring process, or also known as bumps, provide for natural checkpoints as we manage through these uncertain times. This October, during our regularly scheduled fall bump, we'll be looking to undertake a more significant chewing up process. In the fall, we will have a better revenue information, given that the tax filing deadline has been extended to July. And we will also have information around the impact and adequacy of the spending freeze measures that were taken this spring, once we fully close the books on fiscal year 19 and 20, 2019-20. We have already directed bureaus to prepare $9.3 million in cut options for the fall in the event we need to take reductions. This approach will help ensure we can adapt to the changing financial picture for fiscal year 2020-2021. However, the city won't likely know the full extent of to which it's financially exposed by the current crisis until the 2021 calendar year. This is because companies are not required to pay their 2020 tax liabilities until March or April 2021 budget, and 2021. We will use the spring bump again to make necessary adjustments to the fiscal year 2021 budget, and we will build flexibility into the 2021-22 budget development process to enable us to adapt to the uncertain financial situation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Udaley, would you like to go next? Question hasn't been asked yet, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. Thank you.
Got it.
Okay, since I know who I'm directing this to, I'll direct it to Commissioner Udaley. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we're going to talk now about debt service. And are any of the debt service revenue streams at risk? And if so, what is the coverage plan?
Okay, the city is monitoring at-risk revenue streams that pay debt service on various bond issues, but is not expecting shortfalls that would result in an inability to pay debt service or meet debt service coverage requirements. And then I'll go into, wow, this is a long one. You guys saved this for me.
You tell me where you want me to pick up. I'm happy to do so. We're all in this together, Commissioner.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Gas tax revenue bonds. The city's gas tax revenue, which consists of motor fuel taxes, weigh mile taxes, and DMV fees distributed from the State Highway Fund, were originally projected at $80 million in FY 1920 and $87 million in the FY 2021 budget. ODOT's revised April 2020 forecast, which included anticipated impacts from COVID-19 shutdowns, indicated losses of approximately $9.1 million for the remainder of FY 2019-20 and FY 2020-21 in their baseline scenario. The only outstanding issue of gas tax revenue bonds secured solely by gas tax revenues is the city's gas tax revenue bonds 2011 Series A. These bonds are outstanding in the amount of $4.925 million. There is no debt service coverage requirement for these bonds. The FY 2021 budget currently plans for repayment of all outstanding 2011 bonds. The Portland Bureau of Transportation expects to have sufficient revenue to make this payment. Additional PBOT financial reserves. Oh, in addition, PBOT also has financial reserves and has introduced cost-saving measures, hiring and pay freezes, mandated furloughs, and FY 2020-21 budget revisions, which provide capacity to service debt as required. Impact on PBOT's ability. There's no anticipated impact on PBOT's ability to service these bonds.
Thank you, Commissioner Daly. Commissioner Fritz, would you like to talk about the limited tax revenue bonds?
Sure, yes. The city has issued various limited tax revenue bonds, which I find absolutely hilarious, obviously, which notably do not include debt service coverage covenants. A portion of the city's limited tax revenue bonds only rely on revenue streams that may be regarded as at risk, including parking fees and parking meters, surcharges on the transient lodging tax, and the motor vehicle rental tax through the visitor facilities intergovernmental agreement, spectator revenues, and transient lodging taxes collected by the city. While these revenue streams may experience near-time decreases, bureaus paying outstanding debt with these revenues have undertaken cost-cutting measures, which will preserve capacity to pay debt service. Additionally, the city has analyzed the respective funds for adequate reserves, budgetary contingency, which provides additional assurance beyond current year revenue performance. Ultimately, the limited tax revenue bonds are secured with the city's full faith and credit. The city expects to have sufficient revenues, including general fund revenues, to pay debt service on these bonds. The city will continue to monitor revenue streams and develop plans to ensure all debt service is paid in compliance with all legal requirements.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm happy to take over if you'd like, unless you're on the
middle of this. Well, why don't we just wait for the natural breaks, okay? The city's limited tax housing revenue bonds, the 2005 Series A Headwaters apartment projects, which are known as the Headwaters bonds. The Headwaters bonds were issued with an agreement to establish and collect rents and revenues at a level sufficient to provide 1.2 times coverage of debt service on outstanding bonds. The master bond declaration requires that if the project fails to meet the 1.2 coverage ratio requirements, a housing consultant must be employed to review the operations of the project. While the city faces the risk of not meeting the coverage requirement due to tenant relocations required for a roof replacement project and risk of rent forbearance in financial year 2019 to 20, the city plans to issue bonds in the summer of 2020 to refund this issue and to provide additional funding for various capital improvements, including a roof replacement. Terms of the new bonds, including debt service and water coverage requirements, are being evaluated. However, it's expected that the new issue would be secured by the city's full faith and credit. Okay, Commissioner Hardesty, you can bring it home.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your help there. The water revenue bonds and sewer revenue bonds. The city has issued water revenue bonds and sewer revenue bonds secured by the respective net revenues of the city's water utility system and sewer utility system. It is expected that both utility systems will continue to provide net revenues in sufficient amounts to pay debt service and meet all the debt service coverage covenant requirements.
So I hate to do this to you folks, but I actually have a follow-up on this. One of our commissioners, okay, and it may be a staff question. It's not in the script. One of our commissioners noticed in the attachment B, you sent us some very detailed adjustments that are going to be made. And that one of in the category funds and debt management, voila, that you're planning for a pension debt reduction of close to, well, you're going to reduce by $1 million and then you're going to put back 275. So the net is like 750 or so in an adjustment. And I guess what we're wondering, is this a one-time draw? It says it's a one-time draw on funds, but do you anticipate that there are other debt service contributions for their revenue bonds are going to need similar adjustments in the future?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to ask Jessica Kennard to weigh in on that response, please.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. So I'm also going to defer, and I was just looking on our call for Josh Harwood, our city economist, and I'm unfortunately not seeing him on this call. So Commissioner, if you don't mind, Commissioner Mark, if you wouldn't mind letting me make sure that we can get the appropriate staff member to respond to that question. As I said, I thought they were on the call, but they're not here. And I will be happy to get back to you on that question throughout this hearing.
Yeah, and if they're not able to, if you could get that information to Craig, he'll distribute it to the commissioners.
Okay, great. We will look to do that.
Thank you for that question, and thank you, Jessica, for tracking it down for us. So I think there's another question, question 4.
I will be asking it shortly.
I'm sorry. Am I rushing? I'm not trying to rush.
It's quite all right. And in fact, Commissioner Hardesty, you actually set this question up in your opening remarks. And this may require that you perhaps go off script a little and look at this from your individual points of view, because the question was originally intended for the mayor. So as you mentioned at the beginning, I mean, it seems like forever ago that the budget was being developed, proposed. There were some changes made at the approval, and we did receive, as Commissioner Webble mentioned, a list of technical amendments that are being planned for tomorrow. And with the current community dynamics, it's possible that other changes will be made. So it's hard enough to think about next week, never mind in the fall, when you mentioned, well, we have the fall bump and then the mid-year bump and then the spring bump. But we were kind of left with a cliffhanger in the mayor's message when he said, in the fall, when we know the actual size of the revenue. So our question was intended for the mayor, but I would appreciate any responses you would care to make on your own behalf. 2 questions. Can you tell us if anything specific is gelling for the fall true up? And then secondly, and this is something I would like to hear from all of you, in the addendum to the budget message, the mayor said that he talked about using quantitative and qualitative information to tell us what programs will do more than others to serve Portlanders during our recovery and transition to the new normal. Could you perhaps give us your own expectations for what that might look like?
Well, as I think I mentioned at the very beginning of this program, the world has changed radically from where we were when we started this process in May. And has actually changed radically since the pandemic begun because of, as you know, the movement that's taking place on our streets every single night for the last 11 days. I believe, I know that tomorrow there will be significant proposals moved forward to to readjust our budget in a way that is responsive to the community cries that we've been hearing. And I am honored that all of my colleagues have been really paying attention to really what's been unprecedented in the history of the United States of America. It is rare to have 10 to 15,000 people taken to the street every single night. And we would not be the leaders that we are if we were not paying attention to what the community needs are. And so I think what you will see as we move forward is a coordinated effort by the city council to both be responsive to the limited resources that we have, but also to be responsive to what the demands are from the public. These are very exciting times in my mind, even though you would think, how could you be excited during a pandemic, right? But what the city has done, which I am very proud of, is actually made a real commitment to frontline communities. And that means Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. Ever since the pandemic has begun, the city has prioritized those communities that we know will be first hit, and worst hit, and the hardest to recover. I am proud of the work that we've done at the City of Portland, whether it's been through Prosper Portland and prioritizing small businesses of color for relief, whether it's been through our direct assistance to households who are suffering unemployment and food insecurity. I tell you, the city has stepped up in a way that as an activist for 25 years, I never thought was possible. But now the latest crisis, which is the crisis of the community's faith in our law enforcement system, that is now front and center. And as the responsible public leaders, we are all working now to really address those issues. So tomorrow, what you will see are proposals that will be reducing money from the Portland Police Bureau's budget and be investing those dollars in places that the community believes we have been negligent in prioritizing. So I don't want to give away my secrets for my press conference later today or for the budget conversation tomorrow. But I will say to you that I am so proud that we've been able to turn this corner so quickly, right? I mean, many of you who have participated in our budget processes over the years, right? What's supposed to happen yesterday is just an automatic reaffirmation of what we've always said we were going to do, right? That's not happening tomorrow. What you're going to see happen tomorrow is us reprioritizing how we allocate those dollars. And I think that that's the right thing for us to do right now. And quite frankly, some of the stuff that we're going to do, I thought would take me about a decade being at City Hall to do. And so I am thrilled that we're going to be able to do it in a way that really respects community safety, right? So I don't want people concerned. There's a terminology being used called defund the police. And I think there's a misperception that that means that we're just going to close down the police agency and just not have police in the city of Portland. I want to assure you that we are being very thoughtful about how we do that. And as an example, some of the program cuts that are being moved forward, like the gun violence reduction team, transit police, and school resource officers, none of this is new to communities of color, that none of these programs have actually worked to create trust in communities of color. And so I can't speak for my other colleagues, but I can say that based on the conversations I've had so far, there's a lot of interest in reimagining what community safety looks like. And of course, this is just the beginning, because as we move forward, we're going to be able to identify some medium range goals and some long range goals. And I'm excited that we are the leaders that we've been waiting for, and we're going to make this happen. So I think it's probably a little scary for folks who are accustomed to the normal processes that we use. But these are extraordinary times, and business as usual can't be the norm. And I will stop and see if Commissioner Udaley or Commissioner Fritz would like to weigh in on this question.
Or perhaps before they do, I could maybe try to
Now,
summarize my question again and redirect a little. I appreciate your remarks, Commissioner Hardesty. You're talking about reprioritizing existing funds, but we do know that there is still some gap in discretionary revenues. I think you mentioned 9.3 million in targets that are out for the fall bump.
yes.
And presumably things like the business income tax are the fees that are driving the payments for those revenue bonds that were detailed for us may be at risk. And so as you progress forward, what's going to be your yardstick? The mayor talked in his message about qualitative and quantitative information about what programs best serve Portlanders in the recovery. What's going to be your yardstick for making those decisions?
My yardstick has been whether or not we are investing in communities that we know have lack of access to traditional means of support. What we've done with our small business program, I think, is revolutionary. And what that shows is that we have reached out to the communities, and they are telling us what it is they need. Our Prosper Portland grants really supported those small businesses. It started with actually Asian American business owners, because as you know, when COVID-19 first hit, those businesses were facing economic devastation long before it hit businesses all over the country, all over the city of Portland and the state, because of the misinformation and, quite frankly, the racist assumptions about where COVID-19 came from. I cannot answer to what the mayor was thinking in his note, but I will tell you that we are measuring consistently. In fact, every 2 weeks we are meeting to actually measure the effectiveness of where we are investing our resources. Commissioner Fritz, are you trying to weigh in?
Thank you, Madam President. In addition to what Madam President said, excuse me, we, at the Mayor's direction, coordinating between the offices, we passed a resolution as binding city policy. This was before George Floyd's murder. And it outlines the steps and the agreements that we have in terms of prioritizing previously underserved and underrepresented communities, and making sure that we use the equity toolkit, which was developed by the Office of Equity and Human Rights in partnership with the Bureau of Transportation, Water Bureau, and others. So we have kind of the roadmap, and it includes also remembering that climate disruption is a major crisis, which has become, some of the pollution has gone down with people not driving as much or taking airplanes as much. And we're mindful that climate change, climate disruption affects some communities more than others. And so I'm really proud of the work that the council has done together in stating our values, and not only stating our values, but having a toolkit and actions that are how we will make sure that people people who previously were left out of our community are first in the recovery efforts.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Fritz. And I will also say that for the first time, we've actually added teeth and accountability to the Office of Equity and Human Rights. They now have the ability, based on council action, to review the work that's being done to make sure that we are reaching the goals that we have set for taking care of our community. I was proud to see that we invested in the Office of Equity and Human Rights because we use that term quite a bit, but we didn't actually put teeth into their ability to hold bureaus accountable until this current budget cycle. And I see Commissioner Udaley would like to weigh in as well.
Sure. I'm speaking from the perspective of how my bureaus have approached this challenge, but I imagine it's somewhat similar to the rest of the city. We immediately began efforts to minimize service impacts and employee impacts, reprioritize projects, redeploy personnel, and really focus on our core services and essential functions. And of course, when the fall bump conversation comes, we are probably going to have to dig deeper and have some more really challenging conversations. As far as what programs best serve Portlanders and what my yardstick is, we're spending an extraordinary amount of money to make up for our failures. And it's time that we reprioritize those resources and actually get to the root causes. And I think both of my colleagues have spoken to that. The focus has to be people who are not getting their basic needs met, whether it's housing, food, access to jobs and education, mental health services, addiction services. It is costing us a lot of money, but it's also costing us human suffering and dignity and life sometimes. So I'm also, like Commissioner Hardesty, it might sound strange to say that we're excited. This is a terrible time for so many people, but all of a sudden, conversations that were just considered unthinkably radical are happening across the country. And I am very hopeful that we can come out of this stronger than before. I'm a big fan of results-based accountability and using better off measures to develop projects and programs. And so that's my yardstick is how much benefit can we deliver to the people who have been least well served by our city. And by centering those people or those communities, we better serve everyone.
Here.
May I just add in? I have one further response to Commissioner Norton's question, in addition to what my colleagues have said. And we are deeply grateful to our employees who are making a lot of sacrifices. Another unprecedented thing is that they have, with the notable exception of the police union, they have all come to the table. They have negotiated different strategies for different unions, depending on the needs of their members, but all of them offering up significant cost savings for us. And so that would be, I believe, part of the mayor's answer for the fall, is that given how our employees have pulled together and have looked to the good of the entire city and of the people we serve, I would expect them to continue to do so as part of the full monitoring process.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you. And I do want to add just a couple of more things. One, I think what's good is that the city has really prioritized ensuring that we protect our lowest wage workers. And we did that by setting a cap for furloughs. So if you make less than, and Jessica, I'm going to forget the number. Can you tell me? Is it 75,000, I think?
No, it's in the low 60s. It's
Okay.
it's the wage for
If you were calculating $15 an hour, so anybody at the city of Portland who made less than $15 an hour, we have said they don't have to take furlough days. The mayor, if he was here, would tell you that he decided to not take his salary for the remainder of the year because he knew right away that this was really a severe economic downturn that we were experiencing. And what we've done is make sure that those who make less than $100,000 only had to take 1 week of furlough days. And if you are an employee that's fortunate enough to make more, you were required to take 2 furlough days. And for me, I can tell you personally, for my staff, I had one employee that was like on the edge, like he was like a couple dollars over, which meant that as the sole breadwinner in his family, he would have been forced to take 2 weeks furlough day. I took 3 so that he would not have to take 2. Because again, if we're prioritizing our employees, if we are actually valuing what they provide to the city of Portland, we, the leadership, have to set the model for the rest of the city. I think it was shocking to folks that we asked public safety bureaus to take the same 5.6% reduction that we've asked every other bureau to take. Traditionally, we have held public safety bureaus harmless when there have been budget cuts. But this one we knew would be so severe that if we were either all in it together or none of us would be in it, right? So it was very important for us to really set that bar high and to make sure that we were being responsive to our lowest wage employees, as well as making the reductions necessary. These reductions were painful, and they will continue to be painful, but it would have been a lot worse had we waited until the fall. Then we would have had to make some really more severe cuts. And I think that we have taken this very thoughtfully and making sure that the pain is shared across the city of Portland. And I do have some official statements that I'd want to put on the record for this conversation, but I really appreciate you asking us our personal perspective rather than what was scripted, because I get excited when I get to use my own words.
Thank you very much. I think we need to move on because we have people waiting to testify, but thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Appreciate the questions.
All right, my turn. We're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the city's partnerships. So I'm interested in if the current economic slowdown has affected the city's working relationships with Metro, the county, other local government partners, and if the city will be making any revisions to its participation or its financial contributions to major projects, the Portland 5 venues, the Joint Office, the Harbor Cleanup, Levee Ready, Columbia.
Let me just say that I would not support the terminology that we've slowed down our partnership. As you know, Metro had to lay off 700 employees almost immediately after the pandemic was required us to all stay home. The Big 5, as you mentioned, will probably be the last to reopen because honestly, people will not be meeting in large groups anytime soon. And so we have an obligation to prioritize people's needs today and try to do as much as we can to protect those institutions. But our priority must be making sure that people are able to stay in their homes, that people have food, and that we are helping people be able to shelter in place and keep that physical distancing. I think that we have forgotten because of all the mass demonstrations that we're not supposed to be meeting in crowds at all, right? So the city certainly continues our strong partnership with both Metro and the county, and that's reflected, quite frankly, in our support of housing for folks both who are houseless and for very low income community members. It was the partnership that we helped shepherd that created the 3 outdoor rest areas for our houseless people. The county, though they did open up many more shelters, they did not add shelter beds. They opened up shelters so that people could have physical distancing space. And so it was not until the city partnered with the county that we added beds for folks who were in desperate need. We have increased our food allocation significantly, and we have been assisting school districts and expanding how box lunches and food gets to community members who have no access to resources at this time. And so, even though it doesn't show up in the press often, we are working very closely with all our government leaders. We're in a strong partnership with the governor because the governor has to invest in our community. And as of yet, she has not done so. And so we are using all our political capital to make sure that we're continuing to maintain those strong relationships. But clearly, we need federal assistance. And so we're working with our federal delegation to identify resources that we can tap into. We're working with our state legislative body to make sure that they are prioritizing the issues that the city needs them to prioritize. And so we have, our relationships, quite frankly, have gotten much stronger because of the pandemic, because we need each other and we have to do this work together. And because we are uncertain about what our financial picture will look like. I mean, I think we have been very conservative in thinking about what is possible. What we hope is before the fall bump, we will know whether federal resources will be coming to assist local governments. We will know whether the legislature has actually allocated any resources to support local governments and their immediate needs, right? I think that the fall bump is kind of a roadmap for us to just say, we will know much more information once we get to the fall bump. But you know, we don't want to overpromise because we just don't know what the financial picture will look like. I hope that helped, Commissioner Harmony.
It does. I think it does. I had a follow-up question. I so appreciate all the comments around the kind of the shift in strategic thinking around who the city of Portland can serve and should be serving, not just in the midst of the pandemic, but I think long term. So I'm interested in your thoughts about kind of that shift in strategic thinking around the partnerships with the county, with all of the different organizations that the city works with, and how that kind of shift in thinking might lend itself to a long-term partnership shift.
Yes, well, you know, a pandemic teaches you that there are no lines, right? It's like inside government, we think, well, this is what the city does, right? And this is what the county does, and this is what the state does, and this is what Metro does, right? In a pandemic, in a global pandemic, there are no lines, right? And what I've appreciated through our emergency coordination center is that there are no lines, right? It's the question is, what do the people need, right? And the people who are managing that on a daily basis are addressing those immediate needs. I think what we're learning is that that we don't need to actually worry about who's in charge of either this bureau, if you're talking the city of Portland, or what government is responsible for, say, housing, right? The Joint Office of Housing makes it clear that that there should not be any lines. We all agree that people need housing that they can afford to live in. I think the pandemic has showed us how well we work together in crisis. What I hope is that when the crises are over, all three of them, right? Because now we got a pandemic, we got an economic crisis, and we have a racial justice crisis. When these crises have ended, that we will learn that we should be fluid, right? We should not expect the public to have to figure out what government they should be making their demands to. It should be us, the government, actually helping people understand, helping people get their needs met. And so and every time we've had an emergency, I will say I have been impressed with how well people work together, right? It's when it's not a crisis that we don't work so well together sometimes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think we're hearing that echoes from our other districts as well.
Wonderful.
And if I might just add a further response to your question, Commissioner, we do want you to know that we have the same level of discretionary funding and an increase in overall funding to the Joint Office of Homeless Services compared with the current year budget. And also, we have not yet decided how to allocate between the many important competing needs for the CARES dollars. And so we'll be discussing the role of that as part of the ongoing work. So again, this is a strange budget because there's a lot of challenges with what's coming out of the federal and the state funds. The other thing that's important to note is that we are funding the commitment to the Portland Harbor and the Levee Ready Columbia. And because we had been able to put away funds for those needs, it not only allows us to continue the required support, but gave us some financial flexibility, and we'll be looking to build back our ongoing set-aside accounts for those long-term liabilities. So I want, it's clear that, yes, we have an immediate crisis, and also, our debt managers, our city budget office, and the mayor are definitely looking to the long term as well. And so we have to remember that we can't raid all of the buckets and not have any plan to put to make sure that those essential needs are met in the future.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have the next question.
Okay.
We should move on. Most of our questions so far have been very broad. This one's very specific. Recently in the city administrative hearings function has been in the news. How is the council planning to assure that this function is performed throughout the next fiscal year?
Let me take this one, please, Commissioner Hardesty.
Very well.
This is really frustrating. We all know that having an independent, objective hearings office is absolutely crucial, and it's unfortunate that the auditor has asked the council to put it in a bureau, which by definition is then managed by one of us who has other bureaus. So it's been challenging to find another home that provides the same level of objectivity against this conflict of interest. The mayor plans on issuing an amendment to the adopted budget to put the office in temporarily in the chief administrator's office, and then we'll be asking the Charter Commission to take up this discussion of a permanent home when they begin convening later this calendar year. So the Charter currently says that the auditor has to consent to having various functions other than those that are in the Charter, and she has withdrawn her consent to have the hearings office. It's something that I think that the Charter Commission and the people of Portland need to weigh in on as to where they feel the hearings office can most objectively and impartially be housed.
That sounds like a good conversation. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So I have our final prepared question, which I think we've touched on a number of times in the previous responses. So thank you for that kind of context. So our question is just, given the civil unrest nationally and locally around police accountability and racial justice, specifically in public safety, what do we see in this year's budget that addresses the root causes of these public safety and equity concerns?
Thank you so much for that question, Commissioner Osink. Let me just say that these are not new issues to the city of Portland or to the deliberation around budget. It is my view that a budget is a moral document, and where you invest your resources says a lot about what your values are. I am so proud that my council member colleagues and I are all very strong supporters of the Portland Street Response, because when we went and talked to very low-income people who were houseless, people who are experiencing sweeps on a regular basis, and asked them, how would you like someone to approach you if 911 was called on you? And so what a novel idea, going directly to the people who are being most impacted. And what we heard over and over and over again is that what people want is not someone that comes and starts demanding stuff, like demanding their name, wanting to run their background, et cetera, et cetera. What they wanted was someone that came with an empathetic and compassionate ear that would just deal with them where they are. And so out of those conversations, surveys, community meetings, focus groups came the Portland Street Response. Now, prior to the unrest that had taken place, Portland Street Response was in the budget for $500,000 so that we would have a pilot project that would happen in one community. And we had identified Lentz as the community where that would happen. I will be proposing tomorrow that we expand that to 6 sites because when the community says they would rather have people coming out that are not police officers, we need to supercharge this effort around Portland Street Response. And it is a direct response to both the unrest and what the community has been telling us for years. The community does not want people that are armed coming to engage with them when they're suffering from a mental health crisis. What we know, even if you don't have any mental health training, is that yelling at people and being aggressive at people in mental health crisis does nothing to actually help the situation. And so the Portland Street Response is envisioned as a van full of supplies and a EMT, which now is attached to fire, and a certified mental health professional. So think about 6 two-person teams that would be stationed in different parts of the city as a direct response to the overutilization of 911. We have too many community members calling 911 because they are uncomfortable with what people look like. They're uncomfortable with the fact that people are camping across the street from their house or their business. They're uncomfortable because poor people are in doorways. And so the amount of calls that have increased to 911, there was before the pandemic an almost 50% increase in calls for unwanted people. Portland Street Response is a direct solution to calls for unwanted people. And so it is our responsibility to actually create a response that will address what the issues are, which is that people are suffering on our street, and we are not building housing that people can afford to live in rapidly enough to have no houseless people on the street. And so I am excited that we were starting down this path, and then the pandemic hit. So of course we all stayed home. But once we are out of this pandemic, we will go back to the table and really expand and supersize the Portland Street Response so that we have another tool in our toolbox when it comes to community safety. I think we have to move people away from the assumption that when you say public safety, that means police armed to the hill in our communities, because what communities are marching in the street for is they don't want militarized police being aggressive in their community. And so we as the council, we as the community have to come together and re-envision what does community safety look like, right? And how do we as government start putting in place the appropriate first responders to respond to calls for service? I believe that we must send the right first responder to the right incident at the right time. And the Portland Street Response will give us another tool.
Thank you. I think sorry, Commissioner Fritz, can I ask just a quick follow-up on that? I think it'll be quick, it's factual. Is that okay, Commissioner Fritz, before you weigh in?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we thank you again for the summary of the Portland Street Response. We were really interested in that last year when it came up. And so for this year, so there's currently kind of one pilot that I thought was put on hold, but now maybe is back in play. And so
Yeah, I think, excuse me, Commissioner, that was misstated in the press.
Oh.
It was never put on hold.
Okay.
It's always been fully supported by the entire city council.
Okay.
The only thing that put it on hold was the pandemic.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. Can I just get a sense of, I know the scale we're talking about. So the 6 Portland Street Response teams, does that represent like coverage across most of the city, across most hours, or like what would kind of the full city, if the program was proven to be successful and we wanted to shift to like a full Portland Street Response, what is that compared to 6 teams?
Commissioner, let me just say that it was 2 days ago that I proposed that we expand it from 1 to 6. And we have had a work group. We've worked with service providers, we've had law enforcement, we've had fire and rescue. Our work group, Kristen Johnson in my office led the work group. My plan is that we will reconvene that work group so that we're not doing this in isolation, right? So that we're working with people who helped us with the original design and to do the expansion. And I want to caution whether or not we think that this will like be citywide. I don't think 6 trucks can be citywide. I don't think they will be on duty 24/7. But what I'm hoping is giving people the opportunity to be creative. I would love to see one side of town have a Portland Street Response truck that actually works overnight, right? And then another side of town having one that just works like 9 to 5, right? I would like us to use data to inform where we put Portland Street Response. That's what we did when we had one pilot. We chose Lentz because that's a community with a few social services. It's a community that is very geographically, you can surround it, right? It's very geographically small, so you could really have an impact in that community. And so that's why that rose to the top. And I personally don't want to unduly influence. I want to make sure that we're working as part of a coalition that says, okay, now that we will have additional resources, how do we expand this so that we learn a lot from the pilot? The pilot is also going to be being evaluated from the beginning. So we're working with Portland State University with their housing collaborative, their houselessness collaborative. And so we're working with them to do the evaluation from the beginning so that we can make corrections as we see fit, so that at the end, we don't have to wait a year for the evaluation. We'll have the information about what worked, what didn't work, and then we can have the conversation about, based on that, how do we spread this out so that it becomes, again, another of our tools for first responders.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Madam President. One of the advantages of the commission form of government is that we each have authority to be able to work on different aspects of the city's budget. Commissioner Udaly has been a champion for the Universal Defense Program, and she also was able to get ongoing cannabis tax money for social justice grants in this cycle, which we'll appreciate. The Water Bureau has established, with the Bureau of Environmental Services, has established a small grant program to help businesses, particularly those run by people of color and women and people with disabilities, to help them pay their water bill. So that is going to happen, and that's also prioritizing childcare businesses, because again, we're looking to how, we can't get back to normal or back to work if parents don't have safe and affordable childcare. So as I said, it's kind of all of us has been able to work on different aspects of this, and the mayor has been pulling it together as the leader of our team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Okay, I'm just going to say we're running a little bit over time, but we talked with the Commissioner Hardesty beforehand, and we're going to run a little bit long. So, okay, Mark.
I wanted to weigh in on
Oh, sure.
that.
Go ahead.
I just want to mention that the evolution from crime prevention in civic life to community safety is all about this. It is about creating a more inclusive, holistic model of public safety and recognizing that police are just one resource for public safety, and they are clearly not the appropriate resource for many of the challenges that we're asking them to respond to. I mean, we have to take some responsibility as a city for the challenges that we've left to police. And so I want to emphasize that part of the conversation. This isn't just reallocating money away from police to our pet causes. This is reallocating resources away from the police and simultaneously taking work off of their plate. Yes. Because we don't want them responding to people in mental health crises. We don't want them interacting with people experiencing homelessness unnecessarily. We, in fact, want to minimize as many community contacts with police as possible and leave the actual crime, which is a fraction, not even half of the calls coming into 911 are about crime. And that is what the police need to be focused on. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, just quickly. In the Portland street response, as we listen to the voices on the street and in the communities and respond to those voices and to their needs, we are, trying to address safety and houselessness, all of these very, very large issues. And one of the things that I'm curious about is, in addition, in this coalition that is being built to provide the Portland street response and these pilots that could be expanded, will garbage collection be an element or a consideration? Because folks are living in unsafe, unhealthy conditions and don't have the means to deal with their garbage.
You're absolutely right. And let me just say yes, 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 because we have this big contract that we passed a year ago for camp cleanups. And when we passed it, I supported it only under the caveat that we would start breaking that huge contract down into little bite-sized pieces. Because here's what I know to be true. Any camp that is self-managed is clean. It doesn't have garbage or needles all around it. And there are no calls for law enforcement to those camps. And whether it's Right to Dream that was down in Old Town forever. In fact, the camps that are self-managed make everybody safer because they develop their rules, they enforce their rules, and again, never a call to police at all. I think that, and so what happens when there are people camping in unsanctioned camp areas is that, there's safety in numbers. So if somebody comes by who's houseless and they see there are 4 camps here, well, I'm going to add my couple of camps because I'm going to be safer than being out on the street by myself, right? And just like that, all of a sudden you've got 20 campers out there. And then all of a sudden it's 40, right? Then the neighborhood is freaking out. Oh my gosh, right? People are killing my neighborhood, right? And we have to acknowledge as a city, as a community, that we can't build our way fast enough to ensure that everybody has a safe house that they can afford to live in. And so until then, it will be my push that we start developing sanctioned outdoor camping areas where campers will be able to set the rules for how they operate. I think that there's been fear among both my colleagues on the city council as well as the community that if we have sanctioned camps, that we are condoning people living on the street. It is not people's fault that they can't afford to live in the city of Portland. It's not people's fault that if you don't make $24 an hour, you cannot afford a 1-bedroom apartment in the city of Portland. Most working people don't make $24 an hour. And so it is our responsibility, quite frankly, to help people be able to shelter where they are and to help them have the resources to do what all humans do: go to the bathroom, have garbage, and be able to dispose of it, be able to shower, right? It is our obligation to set up areas in town where people can safely rest. I mean, the conversations we've had with houseless people about trying to stay awake 24 hours a day so you don't get robbed, so the police doesn't hassle you, it's just heartbreaking, right? And we continue to put that on the backs of our most vulnerable people. And so it's my goal as we start rethinking community safety. And honestly, neighborhood associations, small businesses, they've been all excited about Portland Street Response and what's possible. And they were also very happy when we actually put together the outdoor camps during this pandemic, because they can see that people are in desperate need on our street, right? So I think we just have to be more proactive. And quite frankly, those kids that show up every night, they'll get proactive. And David, I want to be respectful, Commissioner. I know we're running out of time, but I think this is a vital conversation.
I do too. And we do have a couple of people from the public. And we were scheduled to end at 10:30 today, but we're going to go a little bit longer.
Yes.
Okay. And I think that's the end of our formal questions. And thank you all for contributing to this very important conversation, as Commissioner Hardesty said. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig and see how we're going to introduce the couple of public speakers.
Thank you, Chair Berenger. We have 2 people signed up to speak, Jesse Fox and Benjamin Falla. So the commission would now like to hear your comments, but as you've heard, we are near and over the end of the time allotted for the meeting. So please be as succinct as possible, but please do speak. Mr. Jesse Fox, please. Can our technical people determine if Jesse Fox is here and trying to speak?
Hi, this is Keelan. It looks like there are 2 people waiting to speak. One person is logged in with their phone number, last 4 6331. I'm not sure if that's Jesse Fox. We can check in and see.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and have somebody speak?
Hi,
this is Josh Harwood. I'm with CBO, with the City Budget Office. So that's my number. Sorry.
So we must
okay.
have
okay, thanks.
Jesse on the line, but it looks like we do have the other member of the public.
Hi, this is Ben Falla. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak today. I think a lot of the concerns that I have are clearly being heard. They come, from the community and from the demonstrations that we've been seeing. I'm so happy to hear so many of the commissioners today speak on what's already been done and how they are recognizing the urgency right now that's coming from the community. I think a lot of my concerns, it sounds like, are going to be addressed in tomorrow's City Council meeting, so I'll be attempting to attend. I'm a nurse in the community. I do work, so it's difficult for me to get to the middle of the day ones. And right now I'm at home with my 2-year-old. Yes, sir. So
sounds like he's got strong opinions about this budget, huh?
Oh, very much so. In fact, that was one of my concerns, I think. Yes, we are. I live in the University Park neighborhood, and we've been recently, we had to sacrifice and lose the Columbia pool, and that's just one small issue. But to me, it was a sad day to hear that it was closing, because it sort of represented the investment in the community that Portland's done. And while I know it's not the primary focus, I think the calls to reallocate the funds from police forces into the street response teams, into those sorts of things, and then into the Parks Department, and trying to reopen some of the social services for that are free to all members of our community. I think, those are the types of changes that I'd really like to see, and people in my community are really hungry to see. So I'm excited to see kind of how things develop. And thank you for letting me and my son here speak today.
Thank you, Mr. Fala.
So I guess that is the only person who is here to speak. So I'll turn it back to you, Chair Berenger.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for participating in our hearing this morning. And with no other speakers, I will now close the hearing and open up a regular meeting of the TSCC. And I was wondering if any of the commissioners have any comments on the city budget. If not, I'll turn it over to the executive director for his recommendations and review of the city budget.
Thank you, Chair. We strongly recommend that the commission certify the budget without any objections or recommendations on the budget process, period. The staff did an excellent job in trying times this year. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And with that, may I have a motion authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended by the staff?
So moved, Mark.
May I have a second?
I'll second, James.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. The motion carries, and that's the end of our meeting. Thank you all very much, and have the rest of your day is a good one, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much. Thank you for
everybody.
your work.
Thank you.